and how's it going to look at these stores that we're looking at tomorrow?
Yeah, I think these stores reporting will be a really interesting window into the consumer and how the consumer is doing, especially as we head into the holiday season.
And how much of it is what we're going to hear from these companies is that they're trying to appeal to more higher income consumers. The Kohl's of the world that maybe was a more mass market type product, have they started to change their strategy?
That's a great question. I don't know if they've explicitly changed their strategy, but with Gap, for example, they reported last week, and one thing they shared was that higher income shoppers were heading there. So it'll be interesting to see if, with these other companies, they're seeing higher income shoppers trading down and switching to Kohl's rather than a department store or something like that.
And quickly, Lily, Kohl's this morning announcing that they have appointed a new CEO after an interim role. What changes does that mean?
Yeah, so I think it will be really interesting to see. He's been in the role since their last CEO, Ashley Buchanan, was fired, and he's largely been putting Ashley's strategy in, and it seems to be working so far. So I think tomorrow will be another check to see, how is this going? Are they able to kind of get back? Because they've really been struggling over the past few years.
All right, Lily, thank you so much. We'll see what those earnings and the retail sales report brings. That is Bloomberg's Lily Meyer. Now, in pharma news, Novo Nordisk's pill version of Ozempic has failed to slow Alzheimer's disease in a pair of large studies. Despite being a long shot, the shares are plummeting down at nearly 10% on the news. Joining us now is Bloomberg senior healthcare reporter Naomi Kresge. Naomi, how important was this for Novo in order to get results that showed that it was improving on the fight against Alzheimer's, in order for them to improve against the fight with Eli Lilly and their market dominance?
Yeah, so I mean, we've seen a massive share plunge on this today, and I think that it's really down to two reasons. The first is that this trial was, many investors saw it as Novo's way to show some differentiation in the short term, like Novo's way to kind of come out of the doldrums in the short term, and that did not happen in the study. It was a failure. And the second is that often, in a study like this, pharma will point, if there's a failure, they might point to some subgroup or some small thing in the study that showed some signs of being beneficial. And there really wasn't any language like that in the statement today. They were very straightforward about it having not worked, and they're in fact going to halt an extension of the study and just stop the trial.
Naomi, is there a concern that, Novo has kind of fallen behind in the weight loss battle? It's got the semaglutide, Ozempic, and of course Wegovy, whereas Eli Lilly has this tirzepatide. I don't know the difference, but it seems like, and maybe that's just marketing, a more advanced drug, Zepbound, gets better results reportedly. Are they losing ground in this battle?
Yeah, they're definitely losing ground. And there was a head-to-head study that Eli Lilly ran last year in which Zepbound beat Wegovy. And it has shown, Zepbound has shown higher levels of weight loss in trials. And this is something that that Novo has just struggled to overcome.
All right, Naomi Kresge in Berlin, thanks very much for joining us. She covers healthcare and Novo Nordisk out of Europe. Check on what's going on in futures this morning. We have gains of 0.7% on the S&P NASDAQ futures, with tech stocks climbing up more than 1%, and Bitcoin continues to fall. A little bit of a rebound now at $86,000 even.
Yeah, is that a problem though? If Bitcoin continues to fall, is that act as a leading indicator for retail that's going to at some point sell the overall market? Coming up, we turn not to retail, but to the professionals. Ray Dalio says that the hedge fund model has taken Wall Street by storm, may not stand the test of time. Meanwhile, Bill Ackman readies his own big play with a possible Pershing Square IPO. We're going to have all the latest for you next on Bloomberg Open Interest.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
I'm Alex Rodriguez. And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with another season of The Deal, with athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones.
1-1 is 3 in sports, not 2. And it's because that 3 is imagination. That 3 is putting yourself in a way, having yourself hit the home run.
Erica Ayers-Badon.
I'm a high energy board member. I'm very passionate. I have a lot of opinions.
Up in our zone.
I want to light fires in people's lives. And that is still one of my core mandates for all of my businesses.
Justin Tuck.
I tell all of my friends that play in leagues now, make these relationships now while you're hot. Don't wait till you're like your 12th year in, you're just hanging on.
Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with the close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Let's get to high interest now. Look what's making headlines around the world. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country risks losing its key ally after Washington threatened to cut off weapons and intelligence unless Kiev accepts a U.S.-Russia peace plan. The proposal would force Ukraine to give up territory, slash its army, and abandon NATO hopes. Zelensky's European allies, including France, Germany, and the U.K., backed him in rejecting the plan, calling it a de facto surrender to Putin and Moscow. BHP Group has abandoned a fresh takeover attempt for Anglo American after the smaller miner rejected its offer, saying it wasn't better than its planned $60 billion merger with Tech Resources. The move ends BHP's surprise effort to disrupt that deal and shifts its focus back to major copper projects in Chile, Argentina, and Australia. You can see BHP Group shares actually moving lower, and although both are very little change. Watch out, pod shops. Ray Dalio is not buying the hype. The billionaire Bridgewater founder says the multi-strat hedge fund model dominating Wall Street won't stand the test of time. He spoke on Bloomberg's Pod Lots earlier.
I think it's not going to last. There's different ways to play the game. That's a totally valid way to play the game. Maybe it's a totally fine way for the investment management, but it's not a fine way for building a 50-year-old. I did this. I built a 50-year-old organization.
More on this story. We're joined now by Bloomberg's chief Wall Street correspondent, Sri Natarajan. I mean, Sri, it's been around for 35 years. That's not too bad.
It's like the difference between me and Danny, you know? Citadel and Bridgewater.
And you've been much better at 50 than that, though.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say.
I mean, if you have to think about it, his point here is, and again, you have to look at where Adal is coming from. He built Bridgewater from a two-bedroom apartment in New York in 1975 to one of the world's largest hedge funds. It's been around for 50 years, and it is known for its, shall we say, unusual culture, radical transparency, open disagreements, recording meetings, asking people to rank colleagues based on their attributes. So when you build a culture like that, everything else does seem a little different and a little weird. And his point seems to be that a lot of these multi-strats, so-called pod shops, they might be great at making money, but they don't necessarily build a fantastic business legacy. Ken Griffin would perhaps beg to differ.
Is an Englander.
Is an Englander would beg to differ, and investors might beg to differ because the investors in these firms don't really care about Ken or Izzy's legacy. What they care about is, are they making a good return on their investment? That means if these firms are performing, irrespective of how the broader markets are doing, they're happy. Having said that, you have to realize not all pot shops are made the same. There are enough variations. Yes, they all pool out money to these traders that almost operate as these independent shops. But the way it's done at different places is different. Some people pool their risks together. Some people just let them off on their own, give them strict risk limits, ask them to operate that way. At the end of the day, the differentiation is on December 31st, year after year, you look at how the performance has been. And if over 5, 10, 15 years you continue to perform well, that means you have a model that works and that will succeed. And there will be some pot shops that won't work.
And it means your employees are getting paid, right? Because I get his point, which is the broad point that if they're not working together, they can't build a collegial sort of collaborative sense of school spirit, right? And I understand that. But the main thing that these women and men want is to get paid a lot of money, right? So if they get paid a lot, they're going to.
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. Thank you for joining. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. If you like the work that I do and you would like to support it, please share the links, ask your social media to follow me, and also make sure that you subscribe to all the different channels that I have. I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, Rumble, Substack, Patreon, TikTok, X, and GETTR. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Please share the links and subscribe. You can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can be a paid member to my Patreon and Substack channels. All the videos I do are for free. I have thousands of videos out there going over different subjects about the news, about science, about health, lots of different topics, about the financial markets. So if you would like to help support the work, please donate or be a paid member to my Patreon channel or Substack channel. Again, all these videos are for free. In addition, I have great products on my website. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material in immunology and pulmonology. It's a great way to learn about how the body works. Those course materials are only $50. Get lots of videos, lots of PDFs, and you can learn at your own pace. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I have and products. Since we're getting into the holiday season, start getting some of these products for gifts or even for your New Year's resolution to getting healthy. If you stack and you follow the holistic approach of these supplements, you stack them accordingly, you're going to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. Go to my store and get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lemongrass, charcoal tea tree, but you can also get it in lavender and in peppermint. Very high quality structural nano silver soaps. They'll help with the health of your skin. Very high quality, way better than some of the other soaps that are out there. And you're helping support the channel. Get a few bars for your household. Use them as gifts. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All caps, discount, and then the number 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, with that said, let's start covering the news. All right, there is an issue with what's going on between Japan and China. There was a statement by the new Prime Minister of Japan that they feel as though an attack on some of the islands around Taiwan or Taiwan itself is a threat to Japan. So China's representative basically threatened to chop her head off, and then he retracted. But there's this big political scene that's going on in Asia between Japan and China now. Now, does this mean war today? No. But the thing is that Japan is starting to push back on China, which is a good thing. But China is going, oh my God, you're so belligerent. how dare you protect Taiwan? Japan, how dare you, America, protect Taiwan? So I think that this is just another data point that suggests that war is coming in the Pacific. And it's about time. It needs to happen. China needs to be destroyed. The CCP needs to come down. We cannot have it. Just like we can't have Mamdani as a Marxist running New York City. It's just not acceptable. But at the international scene, it is unacceptable for the CCP to be successful and to push back the hegemonic power of the United States. But unfortunately, there's a lot of America First out there that's not paying attention that America First doesn't mean anything if you lose your hegemonic power. Because most of the people that are America First only, and they have horse blinds, they're too stupid to understand this. The reason why we have the prosperity that we have today is because of our hegemonic power. And there's nothing wrong with the American empire. So with that said, let's listen into Bloomberg here about Japan to deploy missiles to island near Taiwan. This is starting to ramp up.
It's happening right now. It's happening to banking, blockchain, crypto. If change is happening in finance, then it's happening everywhere. And it's happening with Ripple.
Tensions between Japan and China are escalating sharply over Taiwan. Tokyo has rejected Beijing's claims that its position has shifted even as China threatens resolute self-defense against Japan in a formal letter to the UN. Let's bring in our China correspondent, Min, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and Premier Li Qiang, they were in South Africa for G20. Were they engaged? To what extent were they able to talk?
Well, Takaichi was pretty much keeping her distance away from Premier Li. We knew ahead of the meeting that Premier Li, that China was not planning to speak or to organize a meeting between Li Qiang and Takaichi. And ahead of that as well, China had cancelled this trilateral meeting between the culture ministers of Japan, South Korea, and China that was slated to take place this week. And Takaichi was asked about, whether she had any chance to speak with China. She said there was no chance to do so, but she's not closing the door to dialogue. And in fact, Japan is still calling for dialogue and also dismissing China's claims that Japan is changing its position on Taiwan, calling it completely baseless. And this comes after China had submitted a letter to the UN in order to rally support for its position, saying that it's vowing to take resolute self-defense if Japan dares to intervene militarily. So tensions are escalating, and in the meantime, the Chinese embassy in Japan also wrote a text on X saying that China has the authority to defend itself without needing UN approval by citing this enemy status.
Wait. So they move their missiles on their land, the islands around Taiwan. Japan owns those, all right? And China gets all upset. That's like someone deciding to build, let's say, a skyscraper in Texas, and Mexico gets upset because, well, that used to be ours. Well, it's no longer yours. Think about this. China is going to defend their homeland because Japan is putting missiles on land that Japan owns. You know what? It's time to destroy the CCP. But unfortunately, we had a bunch of money managers sending FDI money for decades to China. The United States built up China. It wasn't Chinese built up China. It was the United States. We bought their cheap goods and we sent money over there to build up the factories. If they were so smart, why didn't they do it themselves? No, it's time to destroy China.
but Japan saying that that clause is essentially obsolete by this point.
And Japan not backing down. The defense minister just visiting a military base close to Taiwan. What do we know?
Yes, Japan's defense minister is making his first visit to Yonaguni, which is an island just 100 kilometers to the east of Taiwan, a very strategic location. And he's saying that Japan will plan to deploy some missiles from that island. And we all know about Okinawa. That's the larger island further to the east that hosts a U.S. military base. And recently, a U.S. training has also deployed some of the supplies from Okinawa to Yonaguni. And of course, this is something that would potentially provoke China to perhaps also respond with its own military drills to the region. Now, Japan's defense minister said that this is something that would preemptively deter any military conflict in the region, dismissing any claims that it would destabilize peace in the region, but it's part of Japan's military buildup along the southern island chain.
Bloomberg China correspondent Ming Lo there. Let's actually discuss the diplomatic spat ongoing between Japan and China with Sheila Smith. She's senior fellow for Asia Pacific Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Sheila, really good to have you with us. So we are seeing both sides coming out with very hardline policies. What is Prime Minister Takaichi's strategy here, given that she's not backing down?
No, and I think it's great to be with you as always.
I think it's great.
Takaichi made her remarks in the Japanese Diet in response to the questioning by an opposition party.
I think it's great that she's not backing down. It is about time that the international community says, you step down or you're going to be killed. There's nothing wrong with the international community pushing back on the CCP. You know the problem is? China thinks that they are the center of the universe. Now, how could they be the center of the universe if New York City is?
So the statement that she made was perhaps more clear about whether or not a Taiwan scenario would worry Japan or would lead for Japan to think about its own military acting at that point in time. But the policy is not new. It was interpreted and has become law in Japan's security legislation since 2015. But she is not in a position at home. She's in a minority government. Her party has had 2 setbacks electorally, but she is not in a position, I think, to compromise here. She basically stated Japanese policy, and now the Chinese are taking step by step to escalate. The Chinese government has asked for a retraction, but the chief cabinet secretary very quickly said that there's no reason to retract anything. To be clear here, I think it's really important that Japan, she did not say that Japan would use force against China. What she said was, independently, what she said was, if there's a scenario in which China uses force against Taiwan, then Japan would have to think about the consequences for Japan's defenses. And I think that's important to remember. She didn't say that Japan would militarily intervene in a Taiwan contingency, but she did say a Chinese use of force would cause Japan to consider.
There's a bigger issue here. China thinks the small islands around Taiwan are also theirs.
It's defense needs, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think the escalatory path is interesting to see. It's mostly economic at the moment, but the statement at the UN, for example, and Wang Yi's comments, I think, are suggesting
the world would be a better place with President Xi dead, and that the people within China start to have true representative government in a 2 or a multi-party system instead of a one-party top-down rule. But all these international countries are afraid. They're afraid because China gets upset. No, it's time. It's time. It's time to destroy China.
To put even more pressure into size, right?
Do you think such a diplomatic spat with China will actually help Takaichi's government? As you said, they're in the minority, they're not that strong, but you can see the opinion polls, Yomiuri poll just today being released, Takaichi cabinet approval rating 72%, Mainichi poll 65%. It always happens when you have a diplomatic spat, external issues, and you actually get a boost domestically. Given that Takaichi comes from a conservative side, can this help?
Well, it obviously is helping, and here's the thing to be that I think is important. Her approval rating when she became prime minister was very high. By some accounts, it was in the 80 percentile. Yomiuri had it just slightly lower than 80. Whether this spat was going to help or hinder her approval was not really clear to me, anyway. But what you had was polling, spot polling earlier in the week. Earlier in the conflict, to basically say, did she do the right thing? Did she say the right thing? And 49% of the Japanese people said yes, which is very unusual given, as you may know, the Japanese hesitancy about use of force and making comments about the use of force. What these recent polls, and I'm glad you noted the Yomiuri poll in particular, what they reveal.
The Chinese representative to Japan said that the Chinese should chop off her head. How is she going to react? How should Takaichi, react? It is time to stop the tyranny of the CCP. And not just that. It's not just Taiwan. Look at what's happening with Tibet. China is out of control. It's time to destroy them.
Actually, she's getting a rebound of a positive rebound from the way she's handling this. So I think what this indicates is the Japanese public is not taking the Chinese response well. The economic sanctions have been on tourism to Japan. Well, a lot of Japanese think there's too many Chinese coming to Japan.
The thing is that the Chinese they don't like anyone telling them what to do. They don't like anyone saying, you know what, you're a bad guy, President Xi. You're a bad guy, CCP. They don't like that. How dare you disrespect us? We're the Center Kingdom. It's time to put China in its place. And that's in the trash bin of failed governments. How dare you, Japan, disrespect us? We're the Chinese. How dare you?
Because I think there's been a sense that that's just been resolved and now there's a setback. So I think public opinion is a little bit on her side. That doesn't mean it's going to stay on her side. So the escalatory dynamics are important. Yeah.
Just wondering as well, do you think that all this is helping?
They're calling it Q Day, the moment when quantum computers will be powerful enough to break the encryption that protects our digital world. So how do we get ahead of it? What is quantum safe networking?
This is a departure from the mathematics-based key generation to physics-based key generation.
That all this is helping to boost maybe not just Takaichi, but also Japan's profile on the world stage and how they are engaging with other world leaders. I mean, you recall what we saw between her and Meloni as well.
Yes. So that's a really great question. I'm not sure I know the answer, but I think she has captured the spotlight, Takaichi herself. She's had a really good meeting with the ASEAN leaders at the APEC summit, where she did meet President Xi. The Trump meeting, when President Trump went to Tokyo, went really well. And now at the G20, she seems to be holding her own. I think for Japan, they see themselves as the country who wants to defend the existing rules-based order. Their diplomacy is very focused on multilateralism, and they see China as challenging the current rules-based order. I think there will be support for her in some quarters, or for Japan writ large, but I'm not sure it's going to be uniformly across the globe that everybody will take Japan's side and not China's. But I think
well, of course, because they need some of the loans from China. or they need the goods that China's exporting, or they're on the take. Maybe they're compromised. Not only do we have the 1,000 talent program from China, we have the 10,000 talent program. So it's 10 times worse. 10 times worse than what it was in 2020. It's time that the United States gets their shit together and destroys China. But no, we got a bunch of people it's America first. Yeah, America first. Meanwhile, America first means losing your hegemonic power in the Pacific. Yeah, America first.
On the global stage now to demonstrate that their positions are the right positions, and this will unfold, I think. I'm not sure how, but I think once we get close to either the threat of the use of force or a much more of ships go into the East China Sea, if you start to get that kind of dynamic to the tensions, then I think people will get worried, will get seriously.
China's Xi is speaking with Trump by phone today. All right? And I'm sure they're going to be talking about this. I'm telling you, the United States, for our own benefit, needs to make sure that China stays on the mainland and they do not take over Taiwan. We need to protect Taiwan. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of idiots in our population that don't know any better. So they think that just being, a pacifist and you're just going to focus on America first and only domestic policies, and they don't realize that by losing the hegemonic power and the freedom of navigation in that region led to us having such economic progress. If we lose that hegemonic power, if we lose that freedom of navigation in that area, we are no longer a superpower. Superpowers, you're not just a superpower because you have a nuclear weapon. You're a superpower because you have military projection, especially with maritime. So it's super important not to lose Taiwan. But America First policies, and a lot of people that are focused on only domestic America First type stuff, don't understand this because they're not smart enough.
As you say, now the tensions are mostly economic, and I guess at this stage it's also worth taking stock in how Japan under Takeichi's leadership has been engaging with the US on economic and tariff policy. What do you think is the key thing that's going to shape their relations going forward?
Well, I think, clearly the tariff deal was negotiated by her predecessor, Prime Minister Ishiba, but the gentleman who negotiated it is now in the cabinet. So there's continuity on the Takeichi position on the U.S. And the idea and the visit of Trump to Tokyo produced several documents, cooperation on rare earth and critical mineral supply chains, on scientific innovation, next generation technology. So you see that the relationship is focused on these economic dimensions, but shifting it over a little bit to economic security kinds of priorities. I think she's going to be very consistent. The U.S.-Japan alliance is very, very important to Japan. And I think during the Trump visit, you also saw the two of them on the U.S. aircraft carrier that's home ported in Yokosuka. So we're going to see more of this kind of idea that the U.S.-Japan alliance will be stronger than ever under Takeichi.
All right. I'm going to play another video. This one is about the same subject matter. Japan sends missiles near Taiwan as China reacts.
Japan's decision to reinforce its southwestern island chain with new missile deployments has become one of the most closely watched developments in East Asia, drawing intense scrutiny from Beijing and heightened concern across the wider region. As tensions in the Taiwan Strait accelerate and the strategic environment around Japan becomes increasingly volatile, Tokyo is pressing ahead with a defense realignment that officials say is necessary to safeguard the nation's territorial integrity and protect its citizens from what they describe as growing.
The Pacific Alliance needs to stand up and state, China, you are no longer going to project on the first island chains. And if you try it, there's going to be a war. So do you want to bet against the allies or not? But it gets even more important of just destroying the CCP. You can't have a country that has a top-down control, especially with the types of technologies that are being developed today, with AI and surveillance. Because if they're successful, other nations are going to adopt their policies of a one-party system. You lose constitutional rights, and you're under a surveillance grid. Now, if you don't believe me, look at what was happening in the early 1900s, 1910, 1920s, and even the 1930s in the United States. When the Great Depression happened, what did you start hearing in the politic? Socialism. The whole New Deal is just communism light. This is the reason why it is so important to destroy the CCP. People forget their history, so they vote in a mayor that's literally a Marxist. A Marxist? Oh, he's Mamdani is a democratic socialist. No, that's newspeak for a Marxist. Oh, we got to try these new things to make it more affordable. Well, wait a minute. You try new things? All these experiments have already happened, and they failed in every fucking country. But a 34-year-old may not know their history.
External threats. The center of this unfolding story is Yonaguni Island, Japan's westernmost inhabited territory, and a tiny landmass sitting closer to Taiwan than to mainland Japan. For years, it has been seen as geographically remote and strategically peripheral. But in today's climate marked by Chinese military expansion, recurring incursions near the Senkaku Islands, and a shifting balance of power, Yonaguni is being transformed from a tranquil outpost.
Right, and that's another point. This is a great point that the reporter is saying. Who started this? It's the Chinese doing military incursions through maritime and with their air force. They're probing to see where the defenses are. So when they make their move, they can figure out probabilities of success. Now the question is will Trump back down, or is Trump going to actually do the right thing and actually engage in the war? I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. Because sometimes I think Trump does the right thing, and other times he seems to do the wrong thing. So I have no idea if he's going to protect Taiwan and the allied forces, because an expansionism of China means problems economically and militarily for Australia, for New Zealand, for the Philippines, definitely for Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. These are major problems. Will Trump do the right thing? I don't think he will. I don't think he will, because he had a perfect opportunity to decapitate the Ayatollah, either through our own military or through the Israeli military. And he said no. Now, why? Most of the people in Iran want democracy, not a theocracy, because Trump is a chicken.
Node in Japan's defense network. Japan's Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi confirmed that Tokyo will proceed with its long-planned deployment of medium-range surface-to-air missiles to Yonaguni. He insisted the move is not intended to provoke, but to ensure Japan has the capability to respond to emergencies in its southwestern maritime approaches. He said the deployment is essential to strengthen Japan's deterrence and defense posture. He also underscored that these systems...
All right, you know, building a missile defense system around this area is super important, especially for the Allied forces, because they'll make China think twice on invading Taiwan. But not just that, it's really important to protect their own islands, Japan's own islands. Because remember, China doesn't accept that Japan owns those islands. See, this is where people need to wake up. The first island chain, China thinks they own it. They don't. And then not only that, they're trying to circumvent the freedom of navigation between the Taiwan Straits, because China thinks that that whole 9-dash line is theirs, and that no one should be in it unless they get written permission from the high ups of the CCP. Now, do you think that our battle groups should be getting a special permission to go through the 9-dash line? Hell no. Hell no. Now, if Trump leaves office, let's say in 2029, right? In 2029, he leaves office. Well, wait a minute here. Do you think we're going to have a president that's going to be actually steadfast to support our allies and to be forceful against China? You think J.D. Vance is going to do it? Think Rubio is going to do it? Or some Democrat is going to do it? What about AOC? Or what about, some other Democrat as a president? Let's say Gavin Newsom. You think he'll do it? No. This is a perfect opportunity to hit China now. Now, you also got to start thinking about, well, wait a minute here. Because of the ease of manufacturing of biological weapons, we're adding to the probability that one of us, either the United States or China, will use them. So isn't it prudent to actually hit China now?
In nature, part of a broader initiative to reinforce the nation's defensive perimeter in an increasingly contested region. The deployment comes as Japan completes a series of reforms to its national security strategy and expands key capabilities. The country has already increased its defense budget to record levels and moved forward with programs ranging from cyber defense to counter-strike capabilities. The Yonaguni deployment is seen as both The Yonaguni deployment is seen as both symbolic and practical. Symbolic because it signals that Japan is prepared to defend territories long considered too remote to host major military assets. Practical because these islands offer vital vantage points for monitoring the Taiwan Strait and the East China Sea. But the military positioning is only the surface of a deeper and more consequential development. The announcement follows remarks by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi that have sharply altered the diplomatic environment. In recent parliamentary discussions, Takaichi made clear that Japan views a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan as a direct threat to Japan's own national security. Her statement has resonated strongly across the region, not only because of its content,
okay, I'm going to switch over to CNA Insider, talking about Japanese split on Taiwan issue. All right, so of course, there's Chinese propaganda. We all know this, all right? So this is I haven't seen this video. I suspect that this is Singapore's propaganda machine that's aligned with China, all right? Now, there's been some protests in Japan about Takeishi's stance against China, all right? Now, of course, I'm sure that there really are protests. The question is, how big are those protests? Now, according to Bloomberg's video that I just played, her polling is very high. She's very well liked. So let's take a look at CNA and see if there is some propaganda that's more aligned with China. But the reality here is that, wait a minute, if we're going to be going to war, we've just elevated the probability of another bioweapon release. See, people need to start paying attention. There's a link between what happened in 2020, really 2019, all right, and Taiwan. And this is the reason why I said that you have to watch the videos that I mentioned, biological weapons in foreign policy. Because everyone's so focused on inoculations. That's not where the game is. That's not where it's at. You got to pay attention. Pay attention. But there's so many people out there that are just pontificating about inoculations, and they're not paying attention about pathogens. They're not paying attention about the foreign policy that we have that is behind the scenes that's actually developing biological weapons. Now, if you're going to be dealing with a population that's around 1 billion, 1.4 billion, and that's your enemy, and and a big part of their population lives in high density areas, what are you going to use? What are you going to use? You think you're going to use a nuclear weapon? No. You think you're going to use a pathogen? Yeah. The problem is that the shield for the pathogen release is porous. So other people get sick. Other countries get sick. Even the country that releases it gets sick because it's not that effective. But the thing is the difference between losing your hegemonic power or having 10% of your population die. Now, if you're the Pentagon, what are you going to do? Well, you'd pick to live another day and to maintain your hegemonic power. And you will sacrifice 10% of your population. Now you understand what happened in 2020.
It's the leader of Japan at a time when the strategic landscape in Asia is undergoing profound transformation. Beijing reacted swiftly and sharply. Chinese officials summoned Japan's ambassador and condemned Tokyo's position, accusing Japan of exceeding...
Let me play CNA's video here.
The world's first titanium nonstick pan. It's going to blow your hair back. I'm Mike Regale, 3 Michelin chef, and I've been cooking for 25 years.
China and Japan are having a row. Tourism arrivals from China have been canceled. The boycott could result in a loss of around 2.2 trillion yen annually, according to Nomura Research Institute. Tourism-related stocks in Japan have since sunk. All this after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said that China's use of force against Taiwan could constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan. And in that situation, Japan will be legally allowed to mobilize its troops.
中方对日方近期的军事安全动向感到严重关切。日本自我标榜为和平国家，宣扬建立无核武器世界，但高市政权却对无核3原则表态模糊，语言不详，暗示有可能放弃。日方高官甚至声称不排除引进核潜艇。 这些都充分暴露日方政策重大负面转向，向国际社会释放出威胁信号。
I was hoping that they were going to speak English.
The subject of Japanese militarism has been much discussed since January 2025, 11 months ago, as China held a series of events to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Many films and documentaries were aired in 2025 examining the period of the Japanese invasion. Every year, American and Japanese troops get together for joint drills known as Exercise Iron Fist. The drills in 2025 are reported by the Japanese media to have the largest troop contingent since the exercise began in 2005. It was held in Kyushu and Okinawa. Okinawa is part of an island chain known as the Nansei Shoto chain, which stretches 1,200 kilometers between Japan's mainland southern point, Kyushu, and Taiwan.
And this is what I mean by the first island chains. This is the northern part of the first island chains. There's also island chains that are south, but China thinks that they own them. There's the problem. Hello, and in between these island chains and mainland China is the international waters that China feels as though they own. So they're trying to circumvent freedom of navigation of the U.S. military or anyone. If you had a dinghy and you wanted to go through the Taiwan Straits, China's going to get upset with you, even though you're in international waters. Well, wait a minute here. Why? Because China thinks they own it. And then they think they own the waterways. They think they own the resources of the water, like the fishing rights, and also the natural gas. That's deep underground.
Chain is regarded as a potential front line in the event of a Taiwan contingency.
If you look at the map of Japan, the Nansei Shoto located in the southwest literally, and that geographically very close to Taiwan, East China Sea, and also to the South China Sea. If the Taiwan contingency happens, as the late Prime Minister Abe once mentioned, the Taiwan contingency is the contingency of Japan.
Now just play this in your head. Just play this in your head really quick. If the United States and the Allied forces don't band together and China gets those island chains, that means that mainland Japan is is at risk in the south. And Korea is surrounded. South Korea. All right? We know that North Korea is aligned with China. So, wait a minute. South Korea is going to be really, really worried. Now, don't you remember the archipelago that's coming off of Alaska? Well, wait a minute. That's at risk now. Things are happening with the United States and Russia. Well, wait a minute. That's a problem. What about the Philippines? Oh, China wants those too. Wait a minute. How are we going to move around from the West Coast, from California, all the way into the Middle East? Can't do that. Can't do that. Now you're going to have to go through the Panama Canal and go through the Atlantic and then maybe into the Mediterranean and then down the Suez, or maybe go around Africa. So if they do get the first island chains and we start to lose our hegemonic power, we either decline as an empire or have to push back and try to get those island chains back. We're adding to the probability of unconventional warfare. Now, the game theories that they've used is there's a high probability of nuclear weapon detonation over Taiwan between the United States and China. And China would probably launch an ICBM against the United States first. That's what the war games are saying. Now, do you think that our national security state is not planning biological release in China to weaken their population? Of course we are. Of course we are. Now, do you think that China is not doing the same thing to try to weaken the United States? Of course they are. And there's the problem. So everyone's so focused on, oh, what about all of these excess deaths because of inoculation? That's not where the issue is. The issue is what's coming around the horizon here. Because what was released is benign compared to what's in the fridge. People are so dumb.
Nansei Island chain. In August 2022, China fired 5 ballistic missiles into waters around Yonaguni to protest U.S. Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The nearest missile exploded 80 kilometers off Yonaguni's coast. In February 2025, China flew a reconnaissance and attack drone near the Nansei Islands, prompting scrambles by the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force.
This is the first name given.
In the same month, after U.S. and Japanese leaders held their first summit, the two sides pledged to increase military presence in the Nansei Islands. Japan is ramping up its defense spending at a record pace since the end of World War II. In 2022, Tokyo pledged 43 trillion yen, that's about 300 billion US dollars, to a military buildup that would span 5 years. It lifts defense spending to 2% of GDP from just over 1%. Since then, military presence has accelerated rapidly across the Nansei Island chain. Yonaguni Island is a case in point. The place is known for its wild horses and rugged coastline. But the wooded mountain ranges now carry radar sites to monitor Chinese military activity. And what was once a cattle ranch is now a military camp. These developments...
Now, don't you think that China's smart bombs, or smart missiles, are going to go and hit it to knock out the radar? Yeah.
Divided opinions in the community.
国境の島っていうことは誇りに思ってきたんです。ところがここ最近国境の島だから危ない危ないって煽られてすごく悲しいんですけど、もうそのなんかスピードが速いんですよ。もうこのなんかこの変わっていくその受け入れ、ここまではいいよって言ってたのがそれを飛び越えてどんどんいろいろなこの施設ができたり、状況が変わっていく台湾有事で。
They were talking about the Taiwan emergency.
Residents must contend with more than just the presence of local troops. The U.S. Army also conducts exercises at Camp Yonaguni. Plans are also underway for a new missile site and expansions to the island's small airport and port. Some locals fear the military buildup might provoke an attack.
I'm telling you, as the probability of nuclear detonation gets closer and closer between the United States and China, the United States is going to have to make a decision. Are we going to use unconventional means like biological weapons to weaken China? Or are we not? And we may have to. We may have to. We may not have a choice.
島をそういう利用の仕方、バトルフィールドにするっていう感覚で見ないでほしい。
The fishermen, who have been among the first to see growing Chinese military activity, take a different view.
日本の自衛隊だけでは守れないっていうのはもうお分かりだと思うんです。だからそこの初動犯罪と米軍が一緒になって合同演習を行う。
This division.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand.
This division in public opinion can be found across the Nansei Island chains.
These are protesters against the government.
In Okinawa, some residents are calling for the number of American troops located on the island to be reduced. 55,000 American troops are stationed in Japan. and most of them are here in Okinawa.
The most fundamental difference that needs to be addressed is, I would say, philosophical, in that there are those in Okinawa who truly believes that any type of preparation for a crisis, any type of military buildup to deter such activities from occurring is escalatory in nature. So
think about this. Think about this, about power projection between two major nations like the United States and China. There's a Thucydides trap here. We have an empire that maybe is declining, the United States. It's still debatable if it's declining or not. But I can make an argument for a decline and for an ascent. And then you have China that is an ascending empire or ascending nation, superpower. And they're going to conflict. There's going to be a conflict there. And this is exactly what Thucydides, in his writings, warned people about. Between Sparta and Athens, we're seeing it play out. 2,500 years later. And you know what's interesting? Athens was weakened because of a pathogen. Oh, ooh, but that was a natural phenomenon. Now, if you use biological weapons to weaken an opponent, you add to the probability of winning. And this is why I've been saying that what happened in 2020 is tied to the first island chains in Asia. There's a set of dominoes will start to fall that leads to a further conflict that's going to be much worse. So all the people that thought out there, oh, pathogens don't exist and it's only the inoculation that's the issue. Wrong. Don't get it. They just don't get it. There are weapons that are created and there are shields that are created. And unfortunately, there's no shield in terms of biologics that is 100% proof, especially under an emergency.
To not do anything, because any action would be seen probably from the other side.
So my point here is if you have a group of people from the Japanese side that says, well, we can't have the United States on Okinawa, we can't have any military preparation, then what that does is it allows for China to take the island chains. You think China doesn't take the island chains now because they're eating too much Peking duck on the mainland? No, they don't take the island chains now because they're afraid of a conflict with the United States. You have to be prepared for war, because if you're not prepared for war, you will get war.
So we should not do that. But then, of course, there are others in Okinawa who believes that no, deterrence works.
Yes, exactly.
To pursue peace through strength, we need to be prepared.
Is this fundamental philosophical differences also amplified throughout the whole nation?
I would say so, and there are various public opinions to support this. I think that the Japanese people are becoming much more aware about the importance of the self-defense forces and the Japan-US alliance in deterring conflict from occurring in the region, precisely because what's happening in the Taiwan Straits, as well as what's going on in the Russia-Ukraine front. I think we all thought that we are now living in a world where we decided collectively that we are not going to use military force to change the status quo. Apparently, that's not the case anymore with the Russians engaging in an illegal invasion against Ukraine. If that's happening, then
how are we to be sure that that doesn't happen again elsewhere in the world?
In the 2025 Japan Defense Ministry White Paper, published in July, it states China poses an unprecedented and the greatest strategic challenge to Japan's security.
Now think about what happened. Think about what happened during World War II, and that was with conventional means. All right, it wasn't until the tail end of World War II, when we had the atomic bomb, and it was low yield, not high yield. So it was conventional. Now you add in more advanced biologics, more advanced chemical warfare, higher yield nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles that can circumvent defense shields. And you got a big problem here. So it's time to take out the CCP now before it gets worse. Plus
China,
President Xi doesn't look too well. I wouldn't be surprised that he's rapidly aging. All right, but he's losing power within the one-party system. There are people that are trying to fight to circumvent his dictatorial power. Prime Minister for life. So he's already created enemies. Why doesn't the United States use that in their favor and try to decapitate, figuratively or literally, President Xi? Why not? He's weak. He's weakened. Before something worse happens that's unconventional. The pacifists want to just kick the can down the road and see, maybe, everything will be okay. But every time someone kicks the can down the road, when it does flare up, it's a lot worse. There's more collateral damage, there's more death and destruction, and it's a lot more expensive.
Japan bilateral relations, trade has just gone up. It's gone up more than 300 times, and the figure now is close to $300 billion annually. We know that Japan is China's third largest foreign investor, and China is Japan's largest trading partner. So in the context of all that, is China really a threat to Japan?
Well, China has been the engine of the world economy for past decades, and that is also true for Japan. And currently,
you can thank Kissinger for that, because he thought that a strong China would be a great way where the United States could do a pincer move on Russia, where you have an Asian force that weakens Russia, or Soviet Union at that time, and European theater. And we'll just bring China into the world organization and have good trade relations. We'll build them up. It was a Cold War strategy against the Soviet Union that backfired on the United States. Fast forward to 2025, and now we got to clean up the fucking mess that Kissinger made.
Thousand Japanese companies are operating in China, and many of them are making a good profit. But at the same time, we are also engaged in the large-scale strategic competition of the United States and China, and we are the largest ally in Asia of the United States. So how we can really create the more resilient economic structure. After all, Chinese economy still plays a huge role in the Japanese economy in both positive way and also as a source of risk. So we are now navigating such a complex scenario towards China.
The likelihood of the conflict.
And the World Trade Organizations, with an uber government mentality, wanted to have central banks have less control or more consolidated, or have less central banks and they're more consolidated so they can be run under a uber government, a one world government. All right? They want to reduce the power of states to mint their own currency. This is part of the reason why there's the European Economic Union. All right? Reduce borders. So now you're losing cultural affinity. And then all of a sudden you have either regional powers, economic regions, there's maybe 4 economic regions, maybe 5, versus 100 and whatever number of countries you have, 157 or whatever it is, 87. If you don't have a border, you don't control your currency, you don't have a country. It's easy to take over. So you have this World Trade Organization that was promoting China and moving FDI money in and building up their industry and shipping jobs away from different countries, especially the United States. But it wasn't just the United States. Japan was losing jobs to China. What for? Because there was a foreign policy in the 1960s to bring China into the orbit of the United States to try to circumvent the Soviet Union. And we thought that they would eventually become a democracy. Well, guess what? Mao's edicts continue to echo through time and into the modern day, and they have a one-party system that's top-down control, and now we have all this technology that's being used for population surveillance and social scoring. Big problem here. Big problem. So you have the World Trade Organization and lots of money managers that made a boatload of money by basically gutting manufacturing from modern countries, industrialized countries, especially the United States. And now we have this problem. What are we going to do when China makes their move on the first island chains? Well, you got a bunch of American fat asses just stuffed in their face with a bunch of potato chips and not paying attention to what really is happening.
Between China and Japan, I believe, is when Japan start to provide logistic support to the United States, because that is a kind of treaty obligation for them. But they're not stupid, because according to public opinion, not many people will support a direct conflict with China. I don't believe the Japanese...
if you don't support a direct conflict with China, you're going to lose your land. It's that simple.
The United States military, unless it is attacked by China first, for example, with missiles. But why would China all of a sudden decide to launch a missile attack on Japanese territory?
What's the thing?
Oh, they've already done simulations on this. It's to knock out the radar and to control the maritime area to prevent the United States from getting into the Taiwan Straits. Because when they start to actually invade Taiwan, they're going to have to hit the beaches in the west. And oh, by the way, Taiwan is bifurcated by a mountain range between the west and the east. And it's already been played out in simulations that the United States Marines and Navy are going to have to use the east side of Taiwan, and China invades the west side of Taiwan. So it's very logical for the Chinese to hit those small islands so they can prevent the United States with air power and maritime power. Now, I'm just a little, philosopher, I guess, in New York City, and we can't get an honest-to-God analysis on CNA about what's going on in the Taiwan area? I mean, come on. You'd get better analysis by people that are playing Risk, the board game, than these analysts on CNA.
Japan should defend Taiwan if it ever were to come to that.
There are no treaty obligations for Japan to protect Taiwan. That's clear. What is important for Japan, though, is that the Taiwan contingency does not happen. So it's less about Japan trying to defend Taiwan, but more about Japan doing everything it can with its allies and partners to make sure that such a crisis is deterred.
If Taiwan falls, so do the island chains for Japan. That's the whole game plan for the Chinese. Wake up. Those small island chains north of Taiwan are tied at the hip with Taiwan. They survive if Taiwan survives.
关于台湾问题，我可以告诉你的是，台湾问题是中国内政，如何解决台湾问题是中国人自己的事情，不容任何外部势力干涉。
日方领导人有关言论，到底想向台独势力？
I'm gonna go now to France 24 and their analysis. Now, this was 2 days ago. All right, China. So we're going back a little bit in time. All right, everything that we've been talking about has happened in the last 24 hours. All right, with the missiles moving and China saying that they're going to behead the prime minister of Japan and all that. I mean, good luck with that. All right, now let's figure out what was going on 1 day before.
The reason we exist is because you cannot stay ahead of all friends. So what we do is we block by default. If it's not on the list, it cannot run in your environment.
Oh, you know what? They may have, because of the change in times, this may be over the Chinese and the Japanese tit for tat with this diplomatic issue. So let's listen in here, because this may not be 2 days ago. This may not be the day before incident. This may be the incident because of just the time zone differences.
Access Asia with me, Jenny Shin. Here are the stories we're covering for you on this edition. Tensions between Tokyo and Beijing continue to escalate over Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's comment on Taiwan.
Yeah, it is.
Beijing suspending Japanese seafood imports and cancelling Japan-bound flights in response. Toxic air pollution in the Indian capital forces schools to close and draws hundreds of protesters to the streets for weeks. Angry residents say the government has not done enough to address the crisis. And in China, a military-style boot camp for children to keep them away from phones and computer screens, amid rising concerns around the amount of time the youth spend online. But first, diplomatic tensions between China and Japan are still running high as the row continues. The conflict began with Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's comment earlier this month that Japan could respond militarily if China attacked Taiwan. But what began as a war of words has now gone beyond barbs. China has cancelled some 500,000 Japan-bound flights and has announced it will ban imports of Japanese seafood. It's even postponed the releases of at least 2 Japanese movies over the spat. Well, let's get some analysis on that now with Dr. James D.J. Brown, professor at Temple University in Japan. James, great to have you with us on the program today. Just 3 weeks ago, Senator Takaichi was, shaking hands with Xi Jinping, but since then, the brief honeymoon period, if you will, fell apart. Would you say we're seeing the start of an openly hostile relationship between Japan and China?
Well, for the time being, certainly. But I want to point out that we've been here before. There were similar situations in 2010, 2012.
No, it's different. It's different. 2010 and 2012. First of all, the biological weapons are far more advanced now than it was back then. Secondly, you have hypersonic weapons that both sides are playing around with. The United States and China. We're getting closer to the white papers that were released by the PLA that stated that they wanted the first island chains in 2025. Then they did a revision saying they want the island chains in 2027. So it's not 2012 or 2010. It's totally different. Then you add in the Iron Lady, the first female prime minister of Japan. Do you think that she's gonna be a pacifist? No, for her to politically survive, she has to show strength. So she's not gonna back down. She is not going to back down. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We need more people like her that basically says, China, you're out of control. If you keep on doing this, we're gonna kill you.
The two sides were able to, after a period of hostile kind of exchanges, were able to put these issues aside and get back to not a friendly relationship, but at least one that some of the heat had been taken out of. So what we're waiting to see now is if the situation will be the same. If so, in a few weeks, things will go back to normal. If not, then it could become increasingly worrying.
Now, Takaichi has, declined to retract her remark.
The United States military and its war plan for the Navy is saying 2027 or 2029 is when the United States has to make their move. Now, this is part of the reason why the United States are making more ships. This is part of the reason why there are investments in AI drone technology. This is part of the reason why Trump keeps on saying, you got to decouple from China. Because there's already a military plan from the Pentagon to actually hit China by the United States. This is not something the question is, what lights the fuse? Is it China? Is it Japan? Is it the United States? Who knows? Some other actor? Maybe it's Kim Jong-un deciding to launch a missile and it hits Tokyo by accident. Who knows? But someone's going to make a miscalculation and this is going to speed up.
So what does it say then about her foreign policy, the fact that she's taken such a strong stance vis-a-vis China so early on in her premiership? I mean, what message is she trying to send here to Beijing, or is she even perhaps trying to appeal to her support base at home?
I think in a way she's just been too honest. What she has said is that if there were to be the use of force against Taiwan, if there were to be a blockade, then that would be a very serious security situation for Japan. And the implied bit is, well, and in those circumstances, it would be possible that Japan could enact its right to engage in collective self-defense. So that's actually been the position of Japan for a very long time. What's changed is that most Japanese leaders have been evasive. That's been the underlying position, but they've avoided saying it publicly. The fact that when she was asked in Parliament about this, she responded honestly and clearly, that's what's led to this approach. So I don't think it's that she wanted a sort of crisis here.
Now, why would there be a blockade with the small island chains that's north of Taiwan? Oh, that's because that China wants to protect their amphibious assault on the western side of Taiwan. Now, the mountain range in the middle of Taiwan is to our benefit, because the U.S. military will do a land assault and slowly creep from the East Coast to the West Coast, and hopefully destroy the military that's on the island through that amphibious assault by China. But the thing is that part of the move that China's going to make is trying to protect their amphibious assault. To do that, you have to do you have to control those island chains in the south and in the north, because that would prevent the United States from getting in. Because it's not going to be Japan's Navy that pushes back, it's going to be the United States' Navy and Air Force. But because they have long-range missiles, we got to somehow knock out their radar to be able to get close enough to be able to make our moves. Because it takes forever to make a ship. You know what? People in general don't deserve the freedoms that they have unless you fight for them. And unfortunately, many countries and many people in the United States, they've become comfortably numb.
And she answered it.
Now, Beijing has, of course, vowed time and time again to take control of Taiwan by force if necessary. But in the context of tensions with Tokyo, does that make escalation in Taiwan more or less likely?
Well, it all depends on the Chinese side. It all depends on Beijing. I mean, in Tokyo, the real worry is, as it is for others, is it depends on the decision of one individual, President Xi Jinping. And of course, he's well known to have said to the Chinese military to prepare to be ready, if necessary, in 2027. Now, that's not to say that the Chinese leadership is going to move on.
See? To be prepared. And the United States, is paying attention to the white papers by the PLA. This has already been war gamed. There's going to be a war. This is not going to be like, well, maybe there'll be it's going to happen.
One in 2027, but it certainly makes the Japanese side nervous, and they would be remiss if they were not to prepare for all eventualities. So that's what Japan's doing.
So the SPAD also touches upon, the complex history between the two countries. There's the animosity that, stems from Japanese aggression in World War II, but even since then, they haven't always seen eye to eye. How much of that has...
What about the tens of millions of people that Mao killed? Well, we don't want to talk about that? Oh no, China is all good and not bad.
Plays into what we're seeing today.
Well, very much so, and that's actually been noticeable in some of the Chinese side's responses, suggesting that it's Japan going back to its aggressive old ways, suggesting almost that Japan's, threatening Taiwan, which of course is not the case. So absolutely, the history of Japanese imperialism, colonization, and the atrocities that were committed is why so much of the Chinese population is almost willing to...
China needs to pay attention. Most of Japan is a bunch of Hello Kitties. You think that Imperial Japan is going to come out of a generation of Hello Kitties? I mean, get real. Get real.
Is the worst of its neighbor. Japan these days is a very peaceful country, but because of that history, there is the tendency to assume that Japan could go back to its bad old ways.
And is there a risk that this will go beyond a war of words? How do you see the situation evolving from here on in?
I'm still hopeful, actually. The Japanese side in particular has shown a keen willingness to de-escalate. They sent a member of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to China to meet with a counterpart.
He's wrong. Because hypersonic missiles are still in early development. It's better for the United States to hit China now. Now. Hit them now. Don't wait. Hit them now. Oh, we got to worry about all of these other major manufacturers and U.S. companies that are in China. You know, like Apple, right? Well, no. Hell with Apple. Big deal. They shouldn't have been in China to begin with. They should have built their damn phones in the United States. And people don't want to pay attention to what was the reason why Steve Jobs had their manufacturing in China. It was because Apple was going bankrupt when he was the interim CEO. Remember when he came back? They thought that Apple was going to go bankrupt. And so the only ones that were willing to do the manufacturing for them was China. Voila.
Try and communicate that Japan doesn't want a crisis. In addition, the Prime Minister has indicated that in future she will be perhaps a little bit less explicit. But the problem is the Chinese side are not satisfied with that. They want her to retract her statement. And I think it's very unlikely that she will do that. As I say, she's not really said anything that is untrue. It's not really a change in Japan's position. And if she were to retract the statement, she would immediately look very weak within Japan. And the fear would be in Japan that that might encourage China to push its neighbor around in the future as well.
All right, James DJ Brown, professor at Temple University in Japan. Great to hear analysis. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you.
All right, before we go to the next video, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will help to bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. Allows you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue. Drink it with filtered water. Do that every day. That will help to boost up your immune system, help your endocrine system, and help your other organ systems. Because when you get rid of those toxins, your body will perform better. Also, get the digestive enzyme complex. This digestive enzyme complex has the enzymes that will allow you to reduce the stress on your pancreas, and you can digest your proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. See, normally your pancreas secretes enzymes to digest different types of foods. Different enzymes will digest different types of foods, proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. But as you get older, your pancreas doesn't work as well, no matter how healthy you are, all right? Your pancreas starts to age. So it's important to reduce the stress on the pancreas and to allow for proper digestion, less stress on the digestive system by taking the digestive enzyme complex. Now, there's a dual purpose with the digestive enzyme complex. Not only are you breaking down your foods and reducing the stress on your pancreas, but it also has the enzymes like bromelain to break up clots because it's fibrinolytic. And also, digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins, which was super important in 2020. And that was the reason why I told everybody 5.5 years ago, guess what? Start taking digestive enzyme complex. And get the complete multivitamin. Complete multivitamin is easy to digest, and it has the multivitamins that you need as cofactors for enzymatic activity so your cells perform properly. And again, this is easy to digest. And you get better absorption with this. This is a very high quality multivitamin. It's the foundation for good health. So to get the proper cellular processes to perform, get this multivitamin, and it's the foundation to slow down the aging process. And stack it with the probiotic. This one is the powdered version. I also have a veggie cap version. You drink it with filtered water. And with a good probiotic, you're improving your gut biome, you're improving your immune system, you're improving your metabolism, and you're going to be able to sleep better. And when you sleep better, you're going to be able to consolidate memory, you're detoxifying your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. And over time, you'll also see that your skin is improved. Good health starts at the gut. So the foundation for the anti-aging protocol is to take the multivitamin and the probiotic together. But then you build off of that. Max 35 or cleanse for the first pillar. The second pillar is C60. Third pillar is turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans. And the fourth pillar, boomer boost. And that's a very comprehensive stack to slow down the aging process. And ubiquinol. Ubiquinol will soak up free radicals, help with the health of your mitochondria, increase your energy levels, and protect your neurons. This is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. You can't get anything better than what I have in my store. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get this ubiquinol. It's the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. It's really important to protect those neurons, especially when you start getting older. Once you get to age 40 or older, you really need to pay attention to neural health. All right. Let's listen into Bloomberg.
Sales for Costco versus Dollar General. They're up about 80% for Costco and they're roughly flat for Dollar General. If you look at it from the point of 22, so that was pre-pandemic. If you looked at it from the point of 22, you're down about, call it high teens for Dollar General, and you're up about high teens for Costco. So about 34% spread between the two on a 2-year basis. And then as we kind of go into 25, it's just becoming more pronounced and more extended. And really there was a little bit of trepidation in Q2 around obviously policy and tariffs, and everybody kind of pulled back. But then as we kind of moved into August, that top end of the K just really took off, extremely robust. And I think that was generally a wealth effect where people had excess savings to treat themselves. But the lower end, or the less affluent, I call it really the more affluent or less affluent, the less affluent became more concerned that we'd have another bout of inflation and became more tight with their dollars. We saw more pronounced paycheck cycle. And so as we kind of move into this like tail end of 25, that more affluent is, spending with gusto, and the lower end is curtailing their discretionary spending or just curtailing spending. And so consumer staples companies, see that because they serve everybody. Sure. That's becoming more pronounced, et cetera. So that's how I see it.
Okay, so with that in mind, Thomas, what does that mean for a company like Disney, which appeals to a mass audience and needs the volume, but certainly pricing has gone up, and we've learned from the CFO, Hugh Johnston, that they're going to implement a dynamic pricing model at the U.S. parks as well.
Yeah, I think, what we learned from Q3 is this K-shaped economy, really wasn't, certainly there were brands that were, fully exposed to the lower half of the K. We are talking about. And thus have been challenged. The dollar stores have won trade-ins, so that they haven't been really challenged this year. But what we see here in Q, really ending the year, is really a lot of kind of re-examination of pricing and margin plans, where companies are having to reinvest to try to drive volume or market share. So this K-shaped economy is kind of generally wasn't too much of a problem for kind of consumer servicing brands, but that's really no longer the case. And so, like in QSR, limited serve, it was a tough year, and then finally, as we kind of ended Q3, really a commitment to try to regenerate volume by adding more marketing, add more loyalty benefits, and more price promotions or discounts or permutations of the menu. We heard that from Parks and from Cedar Fair, their results, they had to spend a lot in pricing, promotions, discounts, et cetera, to try to drive the volume that they got. When we look at Disney, I mean, they fared better. I call it the premium of all of the destination theme park brands, and so they're more exposed to that top part of the K than Universal, and certainly the more regional theme parks. But I think it's just like this whole dynamic of the K-shaped economy is starting to really undermine volume and revenue and price realization for multiple brands. I think they're going to go back to Disney. Their memory serves, their per cap spending, if you will, was up about 6-7%, which I thought was surprising. So that was a pretty aggressive rate at a time where they clearly have the competition from Epic and from Universal, and Universal, in our terms, argued it had a very strong Florida business. Obviously, California not so much. Disney was able to hold in there. Parks, did what they could to have a favorable story around Orlando and the Orlando market overall, but that cost them in rate.
All right. I'm going to pivot over to CNN talking about Europe puts forward counter proposal to Trump's Ukraine plan. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. Stack them together to get the max benefits. It's going to help to boost up your immune system, but also help with brain function and increase the efficacy of vitamin D3. Magnesium and zinc, super important for brain function and an immune system. Vitamin C and magnesium, also important for brain function, immune system, and your skin. So please go to my store and get those zinc and magnesium and vitamin C supplements. Myotrol will help to build muscle. When you get older, you start atrophying, and it's hard to build muscle, and there's an increase in loss of muscle. Well, if you take Myotrol, that will help to build that muscle because it helps with the gene expression. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol, and that will give you the muscle gains that you need to have good health. When you get older, you lose muscle. You want to take the Myotrol, gain that muscle, do the resistance training. Now, olive leaf extract, dual purpose. It's going to help with the immune system and your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation, and it helps to control your lipid profile. Super important. You should be taking this every day for your heart health, but also to help with your immune system. So a good stack here to take the Myotrol and take to help with your muscles, take the Myotrol to gain muscle mass. Olive leaf extract to help with your cardiovascular health and your immune system. And stack it with the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium to help with the brain function and boost up that immune system. And boosting up your immune system is super important year-round to help slow down the aging process, but also, especially for the winter season. So go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order, stack them like I'm telling you to stack these supplements, and you're going to slow down the aging process. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into CNN and Europe's proposal for Ukraine.
France and Germany have put forward a counter-proposal to US President Donald Trump's peace plan for Ukraine with a key number of changes. Sources have confirmed the validity of the draft text to CNN, which was obtained by Reuters. Now, among the key changes, it scraps the language regarding the restriction on NATO, instead stating that Ukraine joining NATO depends on the consensus of NATO members, which does not exist right now. NATO will not permanently station troops in Ukraine during peacetime, instead stationing them in neighbouring Poland. Look, my next guest is Kaja Kallas, the European Union's foreign policy chief. She told the US president's team that any plan without the backing of both Kyiv and Europe will fail. She joins me live from EU headquarters in Brussels, and it's really good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Donald Trump has just posted on social media, quote, "Don't believe it until you see it, that something good just may be happening in Geneva," he said. What can you tell us about the latest diplomatic developments? Does this something good that Trump is referencing involve the European counter-proposal to the initial, what was controversial US plan?
Well, we had our money set aside in a savings account. It wasn't doing anything for us. That's when we found Wealthfront with our cash account, with all the interest that we earned. It made us feel like we got a huge piece of this kitchen for free. The high APY with Wealthfront was a clear winner.
Do you work in IT and find yourself drowning in software patches? Think back over the last month. How many hours have you lost manually applying them? If you're like,
well, of course, everybody wants peace. That is very, very clear, and we welcome all the efforts to achieve this peace. But we shouldn't take the focus of who doesn't want the peace, which is Russia. I mean, we haven't heard of Russia making any concessions or any concessions to be asked from Russia, because we should be discussing on how Russia would not invade again and how Russia would stop this war. And not what Ukraine could or should give up, because there's one victim and one aggressor in this war.
Does this at least feel substantive from Europe's position? This is a US drafted 28-point plan.
But if you look at those 28-point plan, 28 points that are on this plan, it's also clear that none of these plans or points are about Russia making any concessions, which is a problem, because if you look at the history, they have invaded the neighbors many times, whereas their neighbors haven't invaded them ever. So we should move from discussing how it would be easier for Russia to invade again to discussing what should we do and what kind of concessions should Russia make in order not to invade again.
Got the bell ringing on Wall Street. Investors there will be keenly watching what is going on in Geneva at this point, as these technical teams get to work on this evolving draft, as Marco Rubio has described it. Earlier this hour, I spoke to Nigel Gould-Davis of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and he's also the former UK ambassador to Belarus, as you'll know. Here's how he described this plan at this point.
The plan itself, I think we should describe it as sort of Frankenstein plan. It has different parts sewn together from a series of apparent conversations with some Russians, although not President Putin himself, and there are parts of that plan which seem to borrow provisions of the earlier Gaza peace agreement, conducted in a very different situation. These are, to say the least, very unpromising conditions for producing something that would be acceptable to all sides.
Is that a fair assessment to your mind?
Well, this is again, the point that we should focus on what are the asks for Russia, because we want this war to stop. And the asks for Russia is, to start with, we should ask that they keep to their international agreements that they haven't so far, kept. So start from there. Also limiting the military of Russia, limiting the military budget of Russia, so that they wouldn't be able to invade again. If we put the limitations on Ukraine, who hasn't made any invasions on their part, then Russia just gets what he wants, and then we are walking into these traps. What we have to understand right now is that although
Russians want to make us believe that Ukraine is in a hurry and Russians are not, but this is actually not true. Why they're making a good face to Americans that they are open to peace again is because they are afraid of the reparations loan, the Russian frozen assets to be used, and they are afraid of the sanctions because they are running out of oil revenues to fund this war. And wars also end when one party runs out of means to fund it. And that's why they are making these faces, and that's why our response should be pressure on Russia, who is the aggressor in this war.
Well, let's get some detail from you on this plan, this counter plan. A European official has confirmed to CNN that the reported text of the UK, French, and German counter proposal is accurate. That text removed the US proposal's recognition of 3 eastern Ukrainian territories as de facto Russian territory, and it removed references to territorial concessions. Is there a possibility of the EU supporting a plan in any way that forces Ukraine to cede territory?
Well, what we have to understand that if Russia could conquer Ukraine, they would have already done so. So to offer them something that they even haven't conquered militarily is, offering something on top of what they already have, or what they have achieved on the battlefield, which is definitely avoiding or rewarding them for the aggression, which is a very bad sign. So again, I think we shouldn't fall into the traps to discuss all what Ukraine should give away, but bring the discussion back to the territory what Russia should concede, because they have started this war and they are doing the killing.
Okay, what about what Russia has conquered militarily?
Well, we have called, and Ukraine has agreed to unconditional ceasefire already in February this year. So, of course, there should be a ceasefire in order to start the real talks. There is clear distinction also between de jure and de facto. So one is what Ukrainians are able to conquer back, but the other one is the stalemate where the things actually stand and not recognizing any territories or conquering of the territories de jure, because that would go really in conflict with all the agreements that we have.
Can you confirm that all European countries are on board with this document and together? And if not, how you expect Ukraine and Russia to agree if the EU doesn't?
Well,
small business owners across the country are using Amazon to pick up, store, and deliver their products.
Yeah.
Hot diggity dog, John.
Finance the old way. Finance the ramped way.
Well, we have on Wednesday the meeting with the foreign affairs ministers of European Union. To also steer this process back to the discussion what Russia should concede. So to really, have the approach from the European side, what we want to see from Russian side, so that this would not happen again.
So as we speak today, you can't tell me that the Europeans are speaking with one cohesive voice.
Well, in Europe, we have 27 different member states, and of course also 27 different historical backgrounds, whereas also 27 approaches when it comes to historical background regarding Russia. So clearly, in order to rush into any agreements, we want to understand what is the price, and again, shift the focus to Russia, who is the aggressor here.
Can I ask you, have you spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio? If so, what's been your message to him? And it is worth noting that Europe still buys oil from Russia. If the European allies are in the talks, is this going to be one of the sticking points that the US is going to bring up time and again?
Well, President Trump gave exemption to his friend who is buying the oil from Russia, so one of the member states. Actually, I mean, it is true that it's kind of strange that we are still buying oil from Russia that is funding this war. And many member states have already ended it, whereas some haven't, and that also gives revenues for Russia, which is definitely not a good thing.
Leave it there. We thank you very much indeed for your time.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for waking up with us here at Live Now from Fox on this month.
Company who made $96 million just last year. And if you force these workers to go on strike, then I will be there with them on that strike as well.
So, New York City's new mayor has wasted zero time taking control of the Democrat Party by calling for nationwide boycotts of Starbucks over what some unionized workers say is the outrageous pay of the company's CEO, who makes 6,000 times as much as a barista, which even a level 1 socialist will tell you has to be unfair. And as you're about to see, these protests could spread to other businesses in the near future.
While Starbucks refuses to come to the table and negotiate in good faith, they are profiting off.
See? Communism doesn't work. And what's even weirder with this whole thing is that Starbucks isn't even that great of a coffee. I'd prefer Dunkin' Donuts. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35. Max 35 will help to boost up that immune system and help with the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx. Help maintain that mucosal barrier and help the health of the epithelial cells. Super important. Get the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Take it every day. Take a teaspoon a day. Gargle about 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. Very effective. And go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and be prepared for the winter season by getting the drops. You can get it in honey and lemon, blueberry, and cherry flavor. Please go to my store, get the drops, get a few bags for your household. They're very high quality. Right when you have that throat irritation, take it right away. It will mitigate the problem. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Sweat of my brow. I work holidays and weekends, but Brian Nichols doesn't think my union is worth negotiating with.
What's the plan and how big could this get? It could get really, really big nationwide.
Union members and their allies vowing to strike in 25 cities to kick off the holiday season and apply more pressure in their campaign to demand better working conditions. Starbucks has responded, saying their employees already have some of the best in the business at $30 an hour in pay and benefits.
The company is stonewalling and not coming to the bargaining table and giving us any decent proposals.
A company that has spent the last 4 years trying to break our union, committing the most labor rights violations in U.S. history.
So union spokesperson says, if they continue this, if they keep this up, Starbucks, their business could come to a grinding halt.
I'm not a big fan of unions at all. At all. It makes things more expensive. And it's not like during the early days of the Industrial Revolution where you didn't have any regulations and agencies coming in and regulating the work environment to make sure it's safe. But unions, what they do is that they eventually make it so expensive that no one wants to go there. And unions, a lot of times, ends up creating a workforce that's just lazy.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform made for anyone with an idea and a drive to bring it to life.
So when our new mayor isn't attacking Trump, he's attacking Starbucks, trying to shut them down. And what nobody's talking about is America is full of companies that don't pay their workers, as well as Starbucks, revealing that there are many targets out there for the communists to go after next. We're talking every business from Target to Taco Bell, as very few part-time entry-level service positions pay anything close to what's needed to afford life anywhere in America, let alone put yourself through college or buy a house. And the striking workers at Starbucks have made it clear they feel trapped, and they are. However, we're talking about part-time entry-level work here. These jobs, they do exist, yes, but not to enrich the worker, but rather as part of a corporate machine, which in fact is how every job works, no matter how much it pays, even the CEO's job. And the brutal reality of this strike is it reveals jobs exist and are offered to benefit the company first. And if there's time, the employee, which includes Starbucks itself. They'd get a cheaper CEO if they could. And if they need people to work as baristas or managers, they're going to figure out what they can afford to pay and then find workers desperate enough to accept those positions. But you know something? That brings us to the real reason why these strikes are happening. Starbucks is not the only company out there that wants to try and figure out how to pay its employees as little as possible. Every company wants to do this, but the problem is these workers who are striking, they do not understand what it is that allows these companies to get away with treating them this way. And that would be the formerly open U.S. border, which allowed 20 million unlawful immigrants to enter our country. And although you can't blame someone for coming here for a better life, you can blame politicians for incentivizing illegal immigration, knowing folks would be forced to work whatever job they can find, which is why it makes perfect sense. Big business has never cared about illegal immigration because wages are based on supply and demand. And if the supply of workers goes way up, well, this is what happens in the job market.
We are talking about a CEO of a company who made $96 million just last year. $96 million, which is 6,666 times the median Starbucks worker salary.
He's 100% right. The CEO did make that much. Is that a lot of money? Absolutely. But we're missing the point. We're missing the reason why the CEO makes a ton of money and the workers in these very locations do not. Government corruption in America has rigged the game in favor of lower worker pay, which jacks up profits and helps CEOs earn more money. But when there are multiple qualified workers for unavailable position, companies don't tend to offer as much pay as they would if workers were less plentiful and less desperate. And adding to that desperation is the fact that many workers also have rent to pay.
Housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that all by right go to American citizens. And at the same time, we weren't building enough new houses.
Yeah, so if the number of people who need jobs goes way up, but the number of jobs stays about the same, and the number of people who need homes does the exact same thing, and we aren't building more homes, we're looking at an affordability crunch never before seen in America, which is exactly what's crushing our country right now. As the inflation all of us experience every single day is because of the simple supply and demand equation that runs every single economy getting flipped on its head because of 4 years of disastrous policies running America, which is a huge problem for these open border communists who want to talk about affordability. They can't seem to put two and two together, and that's because they don't want to.
That's the kind of disparity that we are seeing here. And what these workers are asking for is the bare minimum. They are asking for a salary that they can actually live off of. They are asking for hours they can actually build their life around.
So if you want a better life for the everyday working man in this country, which all of us do, you've got to understand that is impossible if corruption devalues that person's labor and that person's skills to a point where companies can exploit workers. And I want to be clear about something. Starbucks is not doing anything they have not been enabled to accomplish with the help of the government. They're not paying people less than minimum wage, but they certainly aren't paying people more than they have to. And since so many people are looking for jobs right now and looking for work and looking for extra hours because of terrible U.S. government policies, they're getting away with paying people as little as possible, just like every other business that's out there. And what's fascinating is these policies not only enrich CEOs who are the enemy of the communists, but also their other enemy, who are landlords. That's right, because now their homes are worth more as more people need homes, and they can charge higher rents and sell them for more money. And it's not the fault of illegal immigrants that worker pay is low. Instead, it's the fault of politicians who decided to open our border and tell people laws don't matter, which gave greedy companies access to millions of additional workers. And look at this, by closing the border and deporting people who have broken America's law, wages are starting to go up in this country. Plus, if everybody who gets deported leaves behind a job and an empty apartment, rents are going to come down as well. And someone will find work or pick up extra hours, two things that could really help folks who are here legally and are struggling at a company like Starbucks.
Brian Nichols made $96 million in 4 months, sitting behind a desk, working full time. It would take me 2,941 years to earn the same amount. The union has been clear in contract negotiations. We want better take-home pay, more regular hours.
This worker is 100% right. She doesn't make as much as she probably should. But the problem is she doesn't understand the real way to punish a company like Starbucks is to make them pay workers more money. How do you do this? You do this by enforcing America's laws. You do this by protecting the right of people who are legitimately here to enjoy their lives and pursue happiness as they define it. You do not do that by opening the border. You do not do that by punishing these companies after they've benefited from a government-sponsored open border. No, because if you were to do that, if you were to go after these companies and punish them and put them out of business while keeping the border open, you're not solving anything. You're just keeping the problems that Americans are experiencing going. You're fueling the machine that leads to desperation and then the exploitation of every single worker in our economy by virtue of the devaluation of the skills they bring to the table. The Washington Post claims 1 million foreign-born workers have exited the workforce since March. The Post frames this as a sign of the weakening labor supply, which is good for workers because wages go up. And look at this. They are continuing to beat inflation in a boost to workers' spending power, which helps combat affordability. And then it says it right here. In other words, with fewer illegal immigrants, businesses have had to raise wages to attract workers. And look, even if Starbucks isn't hiring people who are in the country illegally, at least knowing it, if you've got an overall worker supply in this country which has been inflated, and some companies are doing that, what does that do? That takes away opportunities from people who are here legitimately, thus forcing more people to perhaps seek employment at places like Starbucks than would have in a situation where the border was shut. And remember, this same individual is also getting crushed by the cost of their home, something these socialist policies have absolutely no plan to deal with.
Yeah, so a few things about that, Sean.
Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to celebrate.
How much should I save for my kids' tuition? You don't have any kids? Not yet.
Meet your new favorite email design platform. Create stunning emails without touching a single line of code. With our editor,
deal with.
Yeah, so a few things about that, Sean. First, we probably need to build about 5 million new homes. And if you look in the red states, we're actually doing a very good job. One of the biggest challenges that we have in the housing market, aside from too many illegal aliens who are taking the houses of American citizens, is that in the blue states, you're not building enough houses. So you go to California.
That's true. That's true. There's not enough building of housing. That's a big problem in New York. But you know what? Another problem that we have in the United States, we have people that are making a ton of money in venture capital that really don't know anything about business. J.D. Vance is one of them. The only reason why he was able to make so much money was because of his wife's connections. It's not because he understands business, because he doesn't. He doesn't even understand. He's invested in biotech. He doesn't even understand anything that's dealing with the technology. Not one bit. It's all about connections. And there's something about J.D. Vance that I don't trust. You know, he wants to look like he's older, so he's a little bit more believable in terms of leadership. What does he do? He wears a beard because he looks pretty young when he doesn't have the beard on. He hides. And then, he was a never Trumper until he became a Trumper. I don't trust J.D. Vance.
So many people moving out of California.
So the VP brings up a great point. People who live in areas of the country where housing is scarce suffer because of it. Now, why is housing scarce? Well, he just explained why housing is scarcer than it's ever been. We didn't build homes, and new people came here and needed homes. That's a recipe for disaster. A disaster that's only going to get worse in places like New York City, where the new mayor wants to freeze rent for rent-controlled apartments, which is just going to put pressure on the rents of market-rate apartments. Those rents are going to go through the roof because landlords are going to pay higher taxes and higher fees than ever before just for existing. And they're going to need to get the money for those fees and taxes from somebody, and that somebody is going to be the market rate tenants who make up the majority of New York City renters, because we're in a housing shortage, just like workers face a job shortage. Shortages are bad because they disenfranchise part of the economy. They disenfranchise renters. They disenfranchise workers. This is a bad thing. We need to correct these things, and punishing companies, punishing landlords while exacerbating these shortages isn't going to do a thing.
They are profiting off the sweat of my brow. I work holidays and weekends, but Brian Nichols doesn't think my union is worth negotiating with.
She's right. The CEO, unfortunately, doesn't think the union is worth negotiating with, because he's right. The union isn't worth negotiating with. Now, of course, everybody wants to see workers at Starbucks, like this young person, who are working very hard, earn more, and have a better life. But the problem is the game has been rigged in favor of these companies. They don't have to play this game. They don't have to improve things for workers because there are so many workers. Somebody's going to come along and say, you know what? We're not bothered by these conditions. We'll work at Starbucks. Sure, I'll work at Starbucks. I've been looking for a job forever. And look at this. Starbucks is not alone. Here we have Business Insider's chart of worker pay at the top 30 retailers in the U.S. Starbucks comes in at number 28 near the bottom, with annual worker pay at only around $14,000 less than the $17,000 the same worker would be getting at McDonald's if they worked part-time there. And the brutal reality here is that a corrupt system has benefited companies who now don't have to pay more to attract workers. Starbucks doesn't want to pay what McDonald's pays. They don't want to pay what Target pays, and they apparently don't have to. And if you really want to punish a company like Starbucks, make them have a hiring problem. Shut down their ability to hire unlimited numbers of people with their current pay structure, and boom, wages are going to go up. But if you do that, you don't punish anybody. You don't take anybody to the cleaners the way the communists want, because they stay in business, they stay open, they maintain their freedom, and that is a problem for some people.
They deserve a city.
Future-proof your home and garden with AARP today. Harvest the rewards for years to come.
They deserve a city that has their back, and I am here to say that that is what New York.
Get real. Get real. How are you going to live in New York if you're working for Starbucks as your primary income source? You can't live. I mean, that's a supplemental. It's either you're very young, you're just starting college, or you're in high school and you're saving up some money. But it's not a career, and sure as hell you can't live on it. I mean, get real. I mean,
My message to Starbucks is that I stand here today to practice with these workers, and if you force these workers to go on strike, then I will be there with them on that strike as well.
So I have no doubt that the new mayor will be on any strike that takes
Now think about it. Now let's say you're a landlord and you have space that you're renting out to Starbucks, and then Starbucks decides, you know what? We just can't afford the cost of our employees in New York. We're going to close down half the stores. And so now his communist policies have affected the landlords. Now they can't collect rent because Starbucks closed half their stores. You know, businesses close down. And then when the businesses leave, they don't pay taxes. Where's the tax revenue then for the city for all these free social programs? Oh, you got to increase the taxes with the remaining businesses and the population at large. Communism, Marxism, socialism never works. Never, ever, ever works.
It's in New York City, but the problem is none of his plans are going to help these workers. He's not going to bring down their rents by punishing landlords with the creation of new apartments that compete with them. He's going to punish them by freezing rents, but that's not going to work. And as far as Starbucks is concerned, the new mayor wants to maintain New York as a sanctuary city.
Think about it.
The new mayor wants to keep the status quo going.
There's 8 million people in New York. 2 million are on subsidized housing. So controlled housing. All right, he's going to freeze the rent for 2 million people. All right, but you're still going to have to raise the rents after that 2-year freeze or whatever it is. So when you average it all out, it's still increasing. And then the ones that don't have the subsidized housing, what do you think the landlords are going to do? Because many landlords in New York own multiple buildings. So if they have some frozen units because it's subsidized, they're going to jack up the rent for the unsubsidized units. So the ones that are a little bit better off have to pay more. Do you think that's fair? How's that fair? How's that fair? It's not. It's not. Why does someone that has more skills, has a better job, have to pay for the subsidy of someone that doesn't? And many of these people are either illegal immigrants or they're young and they think that it's their right to live in a city even though they can't afford it. Well, why are you living in a city you can't afford? You shouldn't be. And to really get down to the rubber meets the road with this, New York doesn't want you. New York doesn't want these people. We don't want the youth that are just transient. We don't want the youth that really can't afford to live in the city, because all they do is make things more expensive. Oh, it's so cool. It's so action-packed. You know, they're in their 20s. They just got out of college. They don't really have any skills, and they want to live in New York. And and then all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, they go back home because they can't make it. Meanwhile, they've left a wake in New York that leads to higher costs for other people. And a lot of these people, what they do is they live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and they have 3 people living there to be able to pay for the rent because the rent's so high, even though that's illegal. And so when there's a lot of people doing it, the landlords can just keep on jacking up the rent. But if there's less people that are transient in the city, then what's going to happen is there's going to be more units available and the price will start to go down. So these younger people that are just transient, they actually raise the prices for people that actually have lived here for quite a long time. No, but they're so young, they deserve to live in New York and understand the cultural scene. It's so important. Really? Meanwhile, they have 0 skills. You know what I love doing? I love talking to someone that is in New York that's young, that thinks they're really smart because they came from an Ivy League education. And you ask them where they get their degree in. And it's like, they got it in economics or in computer science. And it's like, you know, where are you working? How you doing? Where you know, and they're not doing so well. They think they deserve to live in New York. And then you push back and you go, why do you live here if it's so hard? Oh, it's like, but you don't deserve to live here because you can't afford it. Oh, I voted for Mamdani so you can help me support me. No. Don't come to New York if you can't afford it, period.
Which has enabled the exploitation of every single worker in our economy, whether they're here legally or illegally, which is sadly going to continue crushing workers who do work hard, but have been totally lied to by a rigged system that they don't fully understand. But here we are in 2025, Starbucks, they're ranking 28 out of 30 on that list that we saw. Apparently they're not the best, but how bad is a job at Starbucks anyway?
Starbucks has responded saying their employees already have some of the best in the business at $30 an hour in pay and benefits at some 17,000 coffee houses around the country, and insisting they've also poured in $500 million to improve staffing and training. But union members say it's not enough.
Right, so the idea that Starbucks is so awful, nobody will work there.
The reality of the situation, it's never enough for a communist. It's never enough. And eventually, whoever's leading the charge, they end up being a pig like Napoleon. Napoleon the pig, a.k.a. Mamdani, is going to try to run the farm, just like Orwell's predicted. So we have Napoleon the pig running New York City.
Really hold water because they got 17,000 locations. They're not all unionized locations. But what we're talking about here is a tedious balance. The affordability crisis in this country has gotten so bad because of lawless activity in this country that many people find themselves tapped out. And just because people are applying at a job like Starbucks today doesn't mean they're going to be able to afford their rent tomorrow. But the good news is,
if you think you can afford your rent by working at Starbucks, you're out of your mind. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Bring down the inflammation, detoxify your body, and soak up free radicals. That's going to slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system, help with your endocrine system. And by bringing down inflammation regularly, you're helping the health of your neurons. Super important. This is a month supply. Take it every day. Slow down the aging process. And by the way, for people to be prosperous, you have to be able to think. Take the clarity factor. It gets rid of that brain fog so you can concentrate. And over time, what's going to happen is you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. That's going to allow you to think faster and have better memory. Take this every day to improve your neural health. It's very high quality. Take it every day. Drink it with filtered water. And vitamin B complex boosts up those energy levels, revs up your metabolism, and protects your neurons. Very high quality vitamin B complex. And if you're 40 years of age or older, this is super important to take, especially because you need to protect your neurons. All right? We went through a crisis, and we're now in 2020, and we're feeling the aftershocks of it for various reasons. You know, there are various problems will pop up. The big C. Autoimmune problems, right? Immune system issues and dementia, early onset of dementia. Those are the aftershocks of 2020. You need to start protecting your neurons. Now, the reality of the situation is this. About 30% of people that are 40 years of age or older within the next 5 years are going to get early onset of dementia. And there are three categories. Out of that 30%, 75% of them are going to have ischemic problems, microclotting and microbleeding that leads to neural death. About 24.9% will end up having amyloidosis, a buildup of plaque. And about 0.1% will end up getting prion disease. And that's the aftershock from 2020, dealing with just neurological problems or brain problems. There's other neurological problems too that take place. But the bottom line is this: you got to protect your neurons. go to my store, get the vitamin B complex, and get the dual purpose deodorants. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and also in citrus. Made from essential oils from the Himalayas, it's dual purpose. Use it as a daily deodorant, but it'll also help to detoxify your body. Take it every day. It's for males and females. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Use discount 5 and get $5 off.
Things are getting better. They're already getting much better in this country as far as affordability is concerned.
Things are getting better. The price of eggs has gone way down. The price of energy has gone way down. The price of gasoline has gone way down. And as we know, when the price of energy goes down, that starts to filter out into the entire economy, but that also takes a little bit of time.
Right. So what made all of those things go up? Why were eggs so expensive under the last president? Well, because of stupid decisions. Why was gas so expensive? Well, because people didn't want you to have gas and drive a gasoline car. They wanted you to buy an electric car. And you know something? When all of our food gets to where it needs to be, gets to your dinner table because of gasoline, not only when you drive to the store and buy it, but when trucks deliver it, when it gets shipped across the country, I mean, that is a major factor in how much things cost. And the real problem here is that the socialists and the communists, they are right to recognize that we have an affordability crisis in this country, but this is not their issue. All socialism does is increase poverty for everybody. There is no socialist country on this planet that's put in policies like destroying businesses and freezing rents and rigging the economy even more that has achieved wealth for its population. What we really need here is to enforce our laws, pursue common sense policies, do that stuff, and Americans will get back to a situation where things are affordable and the American dream exists once again for people who are here legally. What do you think about that? Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.
Communism doesn't work. And Napoleon the Pig, aka Mamdani, is going to screw up New York City. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Support capitalism. Get the collagen. Why do you want to take this? It's multi-purpose. It's going to help with your skin, help with the health of your hair and your nails, help with your skin, the health of your skin. Super important. Taking this every day is going to help with that dermal layer. You take the vitamin C with magnesium and you drink about 32 to 64 ounces of filtered water that will cross-link and improve the dermal layer. So that's a little trick to help to improve your skin with collagen. Is to take vitamin C and drink filtered water. And this will help with your joint health, your musculature, and your bone density. It's really important. And when you do that on a regular basis, guess what? You're slowing down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this very high quality collagen. This is a month's supply. And get the C60. C60, you can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, or avocado oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you get the higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to bring down stress in the cell and in your tissues. It's going to help the health of your mitochondria. You're going to have more energy. By soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And by soaking up free radicals at the neuron level, you're helping the health of your neurons and improving that neuroplasticity. So you're going to be thinking better. You're going to have better cognition and memory. Super important. And taking C60 every day, teaspoon a day, it's also going to help the basal layer of your skin. And so you will look younger. If you do a before and after of taking C60 for 1 year, and you take it every day, a teaspoon a day every day, you will visibly look younger. In addition, you're going to start feeling the effects within 2 months of taking it. You're going to have more energy. Your immune system is going to improve. Your endocrine system is going to improve. And when you're improving your tissues, the organ systems will improve and perform better. And that's part of the reason why you start slowing down the aging process and you have more vitality. It's very powerful. Taking a teaspoon a day every day is super important to slow down the aging process. It's the cornerstone of my anti-aging protocol. So please go to my store and get the C60. Take it every day. It's really important. And it'll help to boost up that immune system. Because with a good immune system, you're going to slow down the aging process. If you notice that people get sick chronically, they age faster. You notice that people that don't have energy, they age faster. You notice that people don't move around, they lose muscle mass and bone density, and they age faster. If they don't take care of their skin, they look older. Well, if you stack these supplements the way I'm telling you to, you're handling all those problems. Unbelievable. I tell you, there is too many people, there are too many socialists in this country. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Let's listen to Ken Burns about the Revolutionary War documentary that he created.
Food security is national security. Phosphate powers America's farmers, but global competitors like Russia and China threaten to.
Ken Burns, a legendary documentary filmmaker, has a new mini-series about the American Revolution. The 6-part series was released on PBS last week and received praise from many, but others are unhappy with some of its content.
The documentary prominently features Native Americans and makes a case for why their role in the revolution has not been given enough credit in the past. The focus on indigenous nations was celebrated by the Native American news outlet, Native News Online, which writes, quote, "For generations, the story of the American Revolution has been told and thought it unfolded on an empty continent. Textbooks, documentaries, and popular histories have centered the founding fathers, their debates, their battles, their lofty ideals, while ignoring the indigenous nations whose homelands became the battlegrounds for a new republic. Native peoples were never bystanders to the revolutionary era. They were central to it."
Burns and his team almost present the theory that Benjamin Franklin took inspiration from the Iroquois Confederacy, a group of tribes that joined forces long before the revolution began. Some historians have suggested that the Iroquois system of government went on to influence Franklin and the other founding fathers, but the extent of that influence has been widely debated, and some conservatives criticized Burns for the way he presented the subject.
I haven't seen the documentary. I've seen many documentaries from Ken Burns. I think his documentary on the Roosevelts that documentary was great. He did a documentary on Hemingway. I hated it. I couldn't even watch half of it. So I think there's been one on the Civil War. There was one, I believe, on World War II, or it might have been, he coupled World War I and World War II. I think it was just on World War II. So he does great work. There's some of his documentaries I just cannot stand. I hated that Hemingway documentary. I have not seen this one. Hopefully I will. But my understanding of our governance, our system of government, you got to remember, is really based on Freemasonry. All right? And Franklin was a Freemason. He was actually sponsored by Voltaire. So, but the thing is that he was a Freemason, and it was based on a loose governance structure that's like the Freemasons, but also borrowed a lot from the Roman Republic and what was good and bad about it. And the need for a Senate, which is more like the elders, an upper chamber for the legislative branch. The idea that you need a judicial branch to determine what is legal based on laws that were passed and what was based on the Constitution. And this idea of representation by the masses. And that's also loosely borrowed by the Republic in Rome. So they were trying to and then you had a president under the executive branch that represented kind of like during the the Roman Republic, there was a elevated statesman that you could loosely consider as a president of today, in our terms today. The problem is that they could go into an emergency power that leads to absolute control and have dictatorial rule, and that's what led to that's the sunsetting of the Roman Republic and moving towards the Roman Empire with the emperor, running the show. So they were trying to take lessons learned from that experience in the Roman Republic and the fall of the Roman Republic, and have equal branches of government, so no group could control the system, have lots of debating, and have a means for the population to have say in the legislative process. And that's what the House of Representatives, are representing the people. The senators is modeled very closely to what they had in the Roman Republic, where they were more of the elder statesmen. So I don't know where Ken Burns got this Indian thing, because there seems to be a direct map to the Roman Empire. But I have to give Ken Burns the benefit of the doubt because I haven't seen the documentary.
Review writer Dan McLaughlin says the Iroquois system, while sophisticated and forward-thinking for its day, is also nothing that would be recognizable to Westerners as a democracy, let alone some sort of precursor to our constitutional system. And Federalist magazine writer Adam Johnson says, well, this isn't about lies, truths, or half-truths. It's about propaganda, the most powerful of which is built on all three. Within the first moments of the documentary, we are immersed in a progressive framing. Propaganda works by controlling the lens through which we see things. I haven't seen the documentary, so I don't know how emphasized the Iroquois Confederacy thing is. If it's significant, then that would be a mistake, because Benjamin Franklin was aware of and appreciated the Iroquois Confederacy, and he's made remarks that if the Iroquois, 6 Native American tribes, could come together to form kind of one system, work together, then certainly the colonies should be able to do that. It didn't go much beyond that. Our founding documents were inspired by the Enlightenment and people like John Locke and
So I think the way I'm interpreting this is that the Iroquois may have inspired our founding fathers to have a loose, a states' rights versus federal rights. So this is really federalism between statism, right? And so if you had an Indian nation that showed that you can have peace amongst other Indian nations, then yeah, you could borrow from that. But when you're talking about constitutional rights, that's coming right out of John Locke, with life, liberty, and property, or the pursuit of happiness. That's an Enlightenment. That is not from the Indians, 100%. That's English Enlightenment. And the judicial branch, that's more like the Sanhedrin. That's borrowing right. That's borrowing right out of the Old Testament. And then the Senate, and eventually the House of Representatives, the senators coming right from the Roman Republic. And the House of Representatives was having some means of the plebs being able to be represented and allow for the states to feel as though have more say based on population, because representation is based on population, while the Senate is based on 2 senators from each state, equal representation, the same amount, not based on population. So they were to get all the founding fathers in agreement. The three branches of government wasn't really coming from the Iroquois. this idea that you could have states working together based on, you know, some sort of common ground, maybe that was inspired by it. But you also had the Roman Republic that conquered certain regions and subsumed them and gave them citizenship, right, and means of commerce, and it was more of a federal governance, but there was also local governance, which is very similar to what we have today. So I would say that the mapping of our government is more like the Roman Republic than an Indian nation.
You know, Montesquieu, all those British, French innovations in democracy, it was Native American origin. That's kind of...
I mean, in total, he spent, I believe, if I read correctly, like about a decade working on this. It's a 12-hour series, so I'm certain that we didn't focus on how much.
It was more based on the Roman Republic and how Freemasonry works than it's Indian nations. I don't believe if any of the Indian nations even wrote. So, wait a minute, what was their constitution? They didn't have a constitution. Did they have some sort of judicial branch? Maybe they had elders that determine what was, you know, right in the society or wrong in the society and what the punishment was. So maybe they did have some sort of court system. I don't know. But the mapping looks a lot like the Roman Republic.
Copied off of the indigenous people. I'm certain that the magazine that pointed out, thank you for acknowledging Native American people, was pointing out that's something that's overlooked far too often in our society. I think that Ken Burns has a style of this really intense director and a great editor, and we've seen a lot of the stuff that he does and puts forward. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but I know that he rooted this entire docuseries in academic scholarship. So we talk to people who actually study this way more than the people who write for the National Review or you or I, who study these type of topics.
Yeah, but they could study the topic and still have a progressive bent with their research. That's the problem. Is that just because you're a scholar in history doesn't mean that you're not whitewashing certain areas and promoting other areas. A real scholar will not whitewash or promote any particular event. But the problem is with today's scholarship, it's all about progressivism. They're pushing an agenda. I have a hard time believing that our system of government is heavily predicated on an Indian nation's system of government instead of the Roman Republic.
Historians, and he spoke with some people across the board and aisle and doesn't pick a side politically. My question and my biggest concern is why people are so riled up when history is layered and exposed in all the ways. And as somebody who creates docuseries, particularly in Colorado most recently, about the Native Americans that live there, and talk about a lot of the ways that there was loss of land, or how we violated them with the proclamation of 1763, or how the Trail of Tears happened, and all the things that America has.
You gotta understand, when it comes to war, the victor sets the rules, period. No one deserves a nation. No one. Not the Jews, not the Arabs, not the Americans, not the Mexicans, not the American Indian, nobody. You have it because you won, and you protect it from other people trying to take it from you. That's the only thing. That's the only thing. This is the problem that I have with these progressives, these libtards. Americans don't deserve their land. They deserved it, loosely. They deserve it because they won. There's no some sort of celestial reason why. You got to win. You don't. It's not your right. It's not. There's no such right. You got to win. Israel, if they want to have the land, the West Bank, Gaza, whatever, they got to win it, and be able to defend it. If you can't win it and defend it, you don't deserve it. It's that simple. The Indians lost. They couldn't defend. They didn't have the technology or whatever, the organizational skills or the luck. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. They lost. And the same thing will happen. There will be a time when the United States will fall because we didn't protect it.
That displaced and pushed Native Americans out. Why acknowledging them then becomes a problem to places like the National Review? That's what I would say. That they maybe want to look in the mirror and watch the entire documentary.
We don't have a problem acknowledging that we have a
connection to wiping away their history and say it has nothing to do with ours. It certainly does.
We shouldn't wipe away their history, and we should acknowledge the injustices done to them without pretending that their traditions are what form the basis of our government, which is false.
The entire docuseries is not
people's traditions, history. If they don't have the right stuff to be an empire, then they lose. It's that simple.
That is saying that there was an inkling of connection. Perhaps they're looking into that. That's the whole point of a documentary. It's not to tell you answers.
And by the way, there are historians that allege this. There are historians that allege this. Those historians were debunked. It was based on false information that they created those histories. Sometimes expert credentialed people doesn't mean they're correct. They're capable of lying.
It's taking a decade to put this together. That he found a variety of resources to put this together. But again, it's up to the eye of the beholder. New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani met at the White House with President Trump on Friday, and things went surprisingly.
The victor makes the rules. It's that simple. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health. It will help to control your lipid profile, bring down inflammation. That's super important to prevent plaque buildup. Also, omega-3 reduces the stickiness of your red blood cells to prevent overclotting. Goodnight formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower, so you have those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep per night to be able to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and to be well rested. When you have good sleep regularly, you are actually slowing down the aging process. Take this every night and slow down that aging process. All right, let's not listen to Mark Levin today. All right, let's go to Bloomberg.
And so the rest of the world is sort of speeding ahead in electrification, and we've seen with our administration it's caused some delays here, but we do think in the long term we're still going to be heading down that path.
What is going on in Norway? What are these people doing here? I mean, I love the Norwegians, but 97%, that shocks me.
Yeah.
What's driving that?
Quite a lot of factors driving it. I would say, and based on our analysis, we've seen that gas stations and grocery stores are actually joining the charging game. And so around 20% of gas stations and 20% of supermarkets and grocery stores in Norway now offer charging. And they're seeing a lot of business model synergies there. So if you think about a grocery shopping trip, that's 30 to 45 minutes, and that's a meaningful amount of time for a top up on an electric vehicle. So they're starting to compete with some of the pure players in the space.
So what's the technology today on charging? Where are we in terms of a fast charger? How long does it take to charge a typical electric vehicle?
Mm-hmm. So if we're using a 100 kilowatt charger, it could take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Some of the faster chargers, like 350 kilowatts, I can shorten it to 20 minutes or less.
And so so the rest of the world, Norway's an outlier on the upside. Where's the rest of the world, just generally speaking? Where's Europe? Where's Asia, broadly defined? Where are those parts of the world? What are they doing?
So we're seeing in Europe, there's a lot of policy momentum sort of on electrifying passenger vehicle charging. as well as like heavy duty vehicle charging through their alternative fuel infrastructure facility funds. And so they're investing billions of dollars into charging there. And across the EU, we're seeing around 20% EV adoption. And that's going to also range a lot depending on like which country you're talking about.
Right. Where are we in the U.S. today? What's the current environment for the U.S. and charging stations? Because that, for a lot of folks, that's probably a gating issue for adoption of EVs, is that anxiety. Well, where are we in the U.S.?
Definitely. So the U.S. right now, like I mentioned earlier, is at around 10% of new car sales being electric, but that is also very variable depending on the state. In California, almost like a quarter of vehicles are electric, and then along the West Coast, you're also seeing like 20%. Versus some other markets, it's lower than 10%.
And the charging, what's the charging network like here? And what's the plan for the charging network in this country? And how much do we need the government to support that?
So we're seeing a lot of government support right now via the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, or NEVI, on the federal level. And then we're seeing some state level programs as well. We're just, there's a bit of an issue in terms of the deployment of the funds. It's being administered through state governments, which might not have the technical know-how and the expertise to kind of oversee the process. And so that's sort of delaying it. We only have like 100 to 200 like NEVI funded chargers that are out right now.
So what's the, I'm sure you had to take down your U.S. forecast for charging infrastructure in the U.S. What's kind of the next 4 to 5 years look like here?
We had to revise it downward quite a bit. Now I think the EV penetration rate in 2030 is around 30% of new car sales. And so, yeah, that was revised quite a bit lower after President Trump.
So the charging stations, the charging technologies, how much of that is being done by private enterprise versus government supported versus, I don't know,
That's a great question.
Public, I'm not sure how that's getting done.
So in the U.S. right now, it's mostly being led by the private side. In Norway, we're seeing actually a lot of public-private coordination that's really driving it. So Oslo, for example, has a municipal charging app that coordinates payments and access to chargers across several like private operators. And then in places like China, for example, we're really seeing a lot of like state-mandated deployment of chargers via like state-owned utilities.
All right, interesting story. It's a lot of politics in the story, at least in this country. But again, the rest of the world's moving forward. Ash, what do you think?
Why didn't he ask the question about durability? How long are the powertrains? How long do those battery packs last? And what's the cost for replacing those battery packs? What's more robust? What will last longer, a combustion engine or actually a lithium battery powered EV? I mean, come on. The max that you're going to get out of it is about 6 years. And then you're going to have to pay around $10,000 to $20,000 to replace the powertrain or the battery pack. It won't last. What it is it's a consumable. Literally, they've created the EV market to be just a consumable that you have to recycle every 6 years. If you take care of a combustion engine in a vehicle, combustion vehicle, it can last for 20 years. You can't do that with an EV. Not even close. Not even close. Their electronics will fry out before that will happen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root will help to control your cortisol levels and improve your blood glucose levels. That's super important for your immune system and your cardiovascular health. Turmeric will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals, help boost up that immune system. Lignans helps with your immune system and endocrine system, soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation. You stack these together. It's a very powerful stack to boost up that immune system. Ashwagandha root, lignans, and the turmeric. Take it every day. And you're going to be boosting up that immune system, bringing down that inflammation, and slowing down the aging process. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Please go to my store, stack these supplements the way I've told you to, and it's going to slow down the aging process and boost up that immune system. And when you do this, you'll have more vitality. But it's a holistic approach. It's proper diet, proper exercise, do the resistance training, cardio, balancing and stretching, filter your water, stay away from processed foods, have mindfulness or spirituality to calm your central nervous system down, to go into parasympathetic, learn new things, challenge your mind, and proper supplementation. When you do that holistically, you're gonna radically change your lifestyle. You're gonna radically improve the health of your body. And the healthier you are as you get older, the less you have to pay in dealing with medical issues. Please go to my store, law-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All caps, discount, number 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And get some of these supplements for gifts for people. I want people to get healthy, because when we have a healthy society, then we're going to have a more productive society. When we have a healthy society, then we'll be a society that has more vitality, more energy. Please go to my store, law-studio-reykjavik.com.